Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Do you remember these stars? They were icons of Hollywood, faces we grew up with, voices we trusted, lives that seemed untouchable. But behind the glamour, behind the applause, many of them were fighting a silent enemy, one that didn't make headlines, didn't cause scandals, and didn't arrive suddenly. Diabetes. In today's video, we look back at 20 famous actors and performers whose lives were slowly shaped, damaged, and in some cases, ended by diabetes complications. Not dramatic plane crashes, not overdoses caught on camera, but a quiet, relentless illness that followed them for years, sometimes decades, before delivering the final blow. Some of these stars spoke openly about their condition. Others hid it behind smiles, costumes, and late-night performances. And when they passed away, few people connected the dots. Do you remember any of them? Did you know about their struggle? Leave a comment below and share which name surprised you the most. Now, let's begin with the first story. On a cold January morning in 2017, Mary Tyler Moore was rushed to a hospital in Connecticut. She was weak. Her organs were failing. Within hours, one of television's brightest lights quietly faded away. The official cause was cardiopulmonary arrest, brought on by pneumonia. But behind that final diagnosis was a battle that had followed her for more than 3 decades: diabetes. Mary Tyler Moore had lived with type 1 diabetes since the age of 33. For most of her career, the public never knew. On screen, she was radiant, confident, effortlessly funny. She changed television forever with The Mary Tyler Moore Show, becoming a symbol of independence, optimism, and modern womanhood in America. To millions of viewers, she represented possibility. But off-camera, her body was slowly paying a price. Years of diabetes took their toll. She suffered vision loss, kidney problems, heart complications. By her later years, she was nearly blind and relied heavily on those around her. Still, she kept smiling in public. Still, she showed up when she could. Few realized how fragile she had become. In her final months, infections became more frequent. Her immune system, weakened by decades of diabetes-related damage, struggled to fight back. What began as respiratory distress quickly escalated into organ failure. There was no dramatic collapse, no shocking headline, just a quiet ending to a long, exhausting fight. When news of her death broke, fans mourned the loss of a television legend. Co-stars remembered her kindness, her professionalism, her warmth. But many overlooked the deeper truth that diabetes had shaped the final chapter of her life in ways applause never could. Mary Tyler Moore later became one of the most prominent advocates for diabetes research, using her fame to raise awareness and funding. In a way, her struggle became part of her legacy, a reminder that even the brightest stars can be fighting unseen battles. Character 2, Jerry Garcia, 1942-1995. On the morning of August 9, 1995, Jerry Garcia was found unresponsive in a rehabilitation facility in California. He was only 53 years old. The official cause of death was a heart attack during sleep. For fans of the Grateful Dead, it felt sudden, unreal, another music icon gone too soon. But for those who knew his health history, the ending was anything but sudden. For years, Jerry Garcia's body had been breaking down. He lived with uncontrolled type 2 diabetes, severe obesity, and a long history of smoking and drug addiction. In 1986, he had already slipped into a diabetic coma that nearly killed him. Doctors warned him then. His heart, his lungs, his entire system were under constant strain. On stage, however, none of that mattered. Jerry Garcia was the soul of the Grateful Dead. His guitar shaped a generation. His concerts felt more like spiritual gatherings than performances. To his audience, he seemed eternal, someone who would always be there, night after night, playing into the early hours. Behind the scenes, diabetes was quietly tightening its grip. Years of high blood sugar damaged his blood vessels and weakened his heart. His weight made breathing difficult. Infections became harder to fight. Even as he entered rehab shortly before his death, his body was already exhausted. The heart attack that killed him was not an isolated event. It was the final collapse of a system worn down over decades. When the news broke, fans flooded streets, parks, and radio stations with grief. Candlelight vigils appeared across the country. Many blamed drugs, others blamed the pressure of fame. Few talked about diabetes, even though it played a crucial role in his decline. Jerry Garcia's death exposed a harsh reality. Genius does not protect the body. Talent cannot outrun chronic illness. And sometimes, the most dangerous enemy isn't the one making headlines, but the one slowly destroying you from within.
On the first day of August 2020, Wilford Brimley passed away quietly in a hospital in Utah. He was 85 years old. The official cause was kidney failure, following years of declining health. There was no scandal, no mystery, just the end of a long struggle that most people thought they already understood. Because if there was one Hollywood actor whose name became permanently linked to diabetes, it was Wilford Brimley. For decades, his face appeared in commercials, television interviews, and public service campaigns, warning Americans about type 2 diabetes. His deep voice and unmistakable delivery made him almost synonymous with the disease. Many people laughed, some turned him into a meme. But behind the jokes was a man living with the condition every single day. Wilford Brimley was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in the early 1970s. At a time when public understanding of the disease was limited, he chose to speak openly about it. While his career thrived with roles in films like Cocoon and The Natural, his body was quietly absorbing years of damage. High blood sugar slowly weakened his kidneys, his heart, and his immune system. As he aged, the complications multiplied. Kidney disease became severe, mobility declined, hospital visits became more frequent. Diabetes was no longer something he managed, it was something that managed him. In his final years, kidney failure took over completely. Dialysis could only do so much. Eventually, his body reached a point where it could no longer recover. When Wilford Brimley died, many headlines focused on his age. Few emphasized the true weight of his story, that even someone who spent decades warning others about diabetes could not escape its consequences. His life was proof that awareness alone is not always enough.
In the early hours of March 15, 2011, Nathaniel Dwayne Hale, known to the world as Nate Dogg, passed away in Los Angeles. He was only 41 years old. The official cause of death was complications from multiple strokes. For fans of West Coast hip-hop, it felt impossibly early. A voice so smooth, so familiar, suddenly gone. But the strokes were not the beginning of the story. Years before his death, Nate Dogg had been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Like many artists caught in the grind of touring, recording, and late nights, his health took a back seat. Diet, exercise, and long-term management were inconsistent. Over time, diabetes quietly damaged his blood vessels, setting the stage for something far more catastrophic. In 2007, he suffered his first major stroke. It left him partially paralyzed and struggling to speak. Friends and collaborators described how difficult it was to see the man whose voice once carried entire hooks, now fighting to form words. Doctors warned him then that diabetes dramatically increased his risk of another stroke. 4 years later, that warning became reality. The second stroke was fatal. Diabetes had weakened his cardiovascular system to the point where recovery was no longer possible. What the public saw as a sudden, tragic death was actually the final chapter of a long medical decline, one that unfolded quietly, far from the spotlight. When news of his passing spread, the hip-hop community reacted with shock and grief. Tributes poured in from artists who had grown up with his music. Yet once again, the role of diabetes faded into the background, overshadowed by fame and nostalgia. Nate Dogg's story is a stark reminder that chronic illness does not discriminate by age, success, or talent. And when it goes unmanaged, it can strike with devastating speed.
On the evening of June 19, 2013, James Gandolfini collapsed in a hotel room in Rome. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but there was nothing they could do. He was pronounced dead at the age of 51. The cause was a massive heart attack. The world was stunned. One of television's most imposing figures was gone without warning. But his heart had been under siege for years. James Gandolfini lived a life of extremes. On screen, he was unforgettable as Tony Soprano, a character defined by power, rage, and inner turmoil. Off-screen, Gandolfini struggled with weight, heavy eating, alcohol, and a lifestyle that quietly eroded his health. He had been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, a condition closely tied to cardiovascular disease, especially when combined with obesity and stress. Those closest to him later described how difficult it was for him to slow down. Fame arrived late in his life, and when it did, it came with relentless pressure. Long hours, rich food, little rest. Diabetes was there in the background, damaging blood vessels, increasing inflammation, and pushing his heart closer to failure. In Rome, on what was supposed to be a family vacation, his body finally gave out. Tributes poured in from across Hollywood. Co-stars spoke of his generosity and vulnerability. Fans rewatched The Sopranos with a new sense of loss. Yet few discussions addressed the health reality behind his death. The diabetes and lifestyle-related illness had quietly set the stage. James Gandolfini's passing forced an uncomfortable question. How many stars are praised for intensity and excess, while their bodies pay the price in silence?
In the early hours of March 23, 2011, Elizabeth Taylor died in a Los Angeles hospital, surrounded by family. She was 79 years old. The official cause was congestive heart failure. The announcement was calm, dignified, befitting a woman whose life had been anything but quiet. For decades, Elizabeth Taylor had lived under intense physical strain. Multiple surgeries, chronic pain, long hospitalizations, and in her later years, type 2 diabetes quietly joined the list of battles her body was fighting. To the public, she was eternal glamour. Violet eyes, lavish jewelry, 8 marriages, an icon who seemed larger than life. But behind the curtains, her health was fragile. Diabetes complicated her recovery from surgeries and weakened her cardiovascular system. Infections lingered longer. Her heart struggled more with each passing year. By the late 2000s, heart disease had become severe. She was hospitalized repeatedly, often insisting she would recover, often proving doctors wrong, until she couldn't anymore. Diabetes did not make headlines when she died, but it played a crucial role in the slow breakdown of her body, magnifying every other illness she faced. When Elizabeth Taylor passed away, the world mourned a legend. Hollywood remembered her beauty, her activism, her resilience. But few spoke about how chronic disease had shaped her final years, quietly limiting a woman who once seemed unstoppable.
On the night of October 10, 1985, Orson Welles sat down for dinner at his home in Los Angeles. Later that evening, he suffered a massive heart attack. By the time help arrived, the man once hailed as a creative genius was gone. He was 70 years old. The cause of death was listed as a heart attack, but the forces behind it had been building for decades. Orson Welles lived large in every sense. His appetite was legendary. His weight fluctuated dramatically. His lifestyle was indulgent, intense, and often self-destructive. By his later years, he was severely obese and living with type 2 diabetes, conditions that placed enormous strain on his heart and blood vessels. To the world, Welles was a towering intellect. Citizen Kane changed cinema forever. His voice commanded authority. His presence filled every room. But his body was paying a steep price. Diabetes worsened his cardiovascular health, increasing the risk of a fatal cardiac event with each passing year. Friends later recalled how his health warnings were ignored, brushed aside with humor or defiance. He was a man who refused to live small, even when his body begged him to slow down. When Orson Welles died, the headlines celebrated his brilliance. Few mentioned the chronic illness that had quietly undermined his strength. His death stands as a reminder that even genius cannot negotiate with biology.
On the morning of September 6, 2018, Burt Reynolds died in a Florida hospital at the age of 82. The cause was cardiac arrest. For many, it felt like the closing chapter of a classic Hollywood era, the loss of a man who once defined charm, confidence, and masculine appeal. But behind that confident smile was a body that had been breaking down for years. Burt Reynolds lived with type 2 diabetes later in life, alongside chronic pain from severe injuries and decades of physical strain. Multiple surgeries, prescription medications, and a demanding career took their toll. Diabetes worsened his cardiovascular health, increasing his vulnerability to heart failure as he aged. In his prime, Reynolds was everywhere: box office king, magazine covers, iconic roles that made him seem invincible. Yet fame did not shield him from the realities of long-term illness. Diabetes quietly damaged his blood vessels, compounding the effects of stress and aging. By his final years, his health had declined noticeably. Hospital visits became routine. Mobility was limited. The man once known for physical roles and effortless swagger was now fighting to simply maintain stability. When Burt Reynolds passed away, tributes focused on his legacy, his films, his humor, his unforgettable presence. Rarely did they mention the chronic conditions that shaped his final decade. His story reminds us that time eventually strips away even the strongest images, leaving the human body to face consequences alone.
On October 24, 2017, Fats Domino passed away peacefully at his home in New Orleans. He was 89 years old. The official cause was congestive heart failure. To many, his death seemed like a gentle farewell, an icon who had lived a long, celebrated life. But behind that calm ending was a body worn down by decades of illness. Fats Domino had lived with type 2 diabetes for many years. As he aged, the disease slowly damaged his heart and blood vessels, increasing the risk of heart failure. Diabetes also complicated his recovery from other health challenges, leaving him more vulnerable with each passing year. In his prime, Fats Domino was unstoppable. His piano-driven sound helped define rock and roll. His music radiated joy, simplicity, and warmth. Few artists ever made success feel so effortless. Yet even as his songs filled dance halls, his health was becoming increasingly fragile. In his later years, mobility was limited. Public appearances became rare. Heart disease, compounded by diabetes, took center stage. The heart failure that ended his life was not sudden. It was the result of years of cumulative damage. When he died, the world celebrated his influence on music history. Rarely did conversations acknowledge the quiet medical struggle behind the scenes. Fats Domino's life shows us that even joy-filled legacies can be accompanied by long, invisible suffering.
Character 10, Lou Rawls, 1933 to 2006. On January 6, 2006, Lou Rawls died in a Los Angeles hospital at the age of 72. The cause was complications related to lung cancer. For many fans, that diagnosis became the entire story. But it wasn't the whole truth. For years before his death, Lou Rawls had been living with type 2 diabetes, a condition that quietly weakened his body long before cancer entered the picture. Diabetes strained his heart, disrupted his immune system, and made recovery from illness increasingly difficult. When cancer treatments began, his body was already fighting on multiple fronts. Lou Rawls was a voice unlike any other. Smooth, deep, commanding. He moved effortlessly between soul, jazz, gospel, and pop, earning multiple Grammy Awards and decades of admiration. On stage, he projected strength and control. Off stage, diabetes was slowly narrowing his margin for survival. As his health declined, infections became more dangerous. Fatigue deepened. The resilience that had carried him through a demanding career was no longer enough. When cancer finally took hold, diabetes amplified every complication, turning a difficult fight into an overwhelming one. When news of his death broke, tributes celebrated his music and humanitarian work. Few mentioned how chronic illness had shaped his final years, quietly influencing the outcome long before the headlines appeared. Lou Rawls' story reminds us that death is rarely caused by a single diagnosis. More often, it's the result of years of damage, layered one on top of another.
Character 11, Larry Hagman, 1912 to 2012. On November 23, 2012, Larry Hagman died in a Dallas hospital at the age of 81. The official cause was complications from cancer. For most viewers, the story ended there. But once again, the deeper health picture was far more complex. Larry Hagman had lived for years with type 2 diabetes, along with severe liver damage caused by decades of alcohol abuse. By the time cancer entered the equation, his body was already compromised. Diabetes weakened his immune system and cardiovascular health, making it harder for him to tolerate treatment and recover from setbacks. To television audiences, Hagman was unforgettable. As J.R. Ewing on Dallas, he became one of the most recognizable villains in TV history. Powerful, ruthless, larger than life. Yet behind that iconic smile was a man whose health had been unraveling quietly. In his later years, hospitalizations became frequent. His energy faded. The damage done by diabetes and liver disease left him with little reserve. When cancer progressed, there was little his body could do to resist. When Larry Hagman passed away, fans mourned a television legend, but few acknowledged how chronic illness had slowly boxed him into a corner long before the final diagnosis. Carol O'Connor, 1924-2001. On June 21, 2001, Carol O'Connor died in a California hospital at the age of 76. The cause was listed as a heart attack. The news was met with sadness, but little surprise. His health had been fragile for years. Carol O'Connor lived with type 2 diabetes, a condition that quietly worsened his cardiovascular health over time. As the disease progressed, it increased his risk of heart failure and stroke, risks that became more dangerous as he aged. Diabetes was not the headline when he died, but it was a critical factor in the weakening of his heart. To millions of Americans, O'Connor was Archie Bunker, the loud, stubborn, unforgettable patriarch of All in the Family. He embodied a generation, sparked national conversations, and dominated television ratings for years. On screen, he appeared indestructible. Off-screen, his life was marked by deep personal pain. The suicide of his son in the late 1990s devastated him emotionally, compounding the physical strain he was already under. Stress, grief, and chronic illness formed a dangerous combination. Diabetes continued its silent work, damaging blood vessels and limiting his body's ability to recover. When Carol O'Connor died, tributes focused on his cultural impact and groundbreaking television career. Few mentioned the long-term illness that had quietly shaped his final years. His story is another reminder that emotional trauma and chronic disease often collide in ways the public never sees.
Character 13, Sherman Hemsley, 1938-2012. On July 24, 2012, Sherman Hemsley was found dead in his home in El Paso, Texas. He was 74 years old. The official cause was listed as natural causes, later linked to heart failure. There was no warning to the public, no long hospital vigil. His passing felt sudden, especially to fans who had grown up laughing at his performances. But his body had been sending signals for years. Sherman Hemsley lived with type 2 diabetes, a condition that quietly increased his risk of cardiovascular disease. Over time, diabetes weakened his heart and blood vessels, making him more vulnerable to fatal cardiac events. Like many performers of his generation, he kept his health struggles private, choosing not to discuss them publicly. To television audiences, Hemsley was George Jefferson, sharp-tongued, ambitious, unforgettable. The Jeffersons became one of the most successful sitcoms in American television history, and his character symbolized upward mobility and resilience. On screen, he radiated energy. Off-screen, he lived a far more secluded life in later years. As his health declined, he withdrew from the spotlight. Appearances became rare. Friends noted that he valued privacy above all else, even as diabetes continued its slow, damaging work. When news of his death broke, fans were shocked by how little they knew about his final years. His story highlights how easily chronic illness can remain invisible, especially when fame fades.
On November 22, 1986, Scatman Crothers suffered a sudden stroke at his home in Los Angeles. He was rushed to the hospital, but his condition deteriorated rapidly. Within days, he was gone. He was 76 years old. The official cause was complications from a stroke, but the groundwork for that moment had been laid long before. Scatman Crothers lived with type 2 diabetes, a condition that silently damages blood vessels over time. Diabetes significantly increases the risk of stroke by weakening arteries and disrupting circulation to the brain. In Crothers' case, the disease had been quietly raising the odds for years. To audiences, he was warmth personified, a familiar face in film and television, from The Shining to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. His voice and presence carried wisdom, humor, and compassion. He often played mentors, caretakers, and guides, roles that made him feel timeless and safe. Off-screen, his health was far more fragile. Diabetes strained his cardiovascular system, and age only intensified the danger. When the stroke came, his body did not have the resilience to recover. When Scatman Crothers died, Hollywood mourned a beloved character actor, but few discussions touched on how diabetes had quietly increased the risk of the event that ended his life. His passing reminds us that strokes rarely come out of nowhere. Often, they are the final consequence of years of unseen damage.
On October 11, 1991, Red Fox collapsed on the set of his television show The Royal Family. At first, the crew thought he was joking. He had made fake heart attack gags for years, but this time, it was real. Within minutes, one of comedy's most fearless voices was gone. He was 68 years old. The cause was a heart attack. Red Fox had lived with type 2 diabetes and chronic heart disease for years. Diabetes had quietly damaged his cardiovascular system, increasing the likelihood of a fatal cardiac event. Long before that final moment on set, his heart had been under immense strain. To audiences, Fox was explosive, sharp, unapologetic. Sanford and Son made him a household name, and his stand-up comedy pushed boundaries that few dared to cross. He thrived on intensity, fast talking, constant motion, relentless energy. But behind the scenes, his health was fragile. Diabetes complicated everything: blood pressure issues, circulation problems, warning signs that were easy to ignore when laughter was the priority. When he collapsed, there was no dramatic buildup, no hospital farewell, just a sudden end captured by witnesses who would never forget it. His death became one of the most shocking moments in television history. Red Fox's passing forces a sobering thought. How often do we confuse strength on stage with strength in the body?
On March 9, 1996, George Burns passed away peacefully in Beverly Hills. He was 100 years old. The official cause was cardiac arrest. To many, his death felt almost ceremonial. Hollywood's oldest living legend finally taking a bow. George Burns had lived with type 2 diabetes later in life, a condition that required careful management as his body aged. While diabetes was not the direct cause of his death, it quietly contributed to the gradual weakening of his cardiovascular system. At 100 years old, even small stresses carried enormous weight. To the public, Burns seemed indestructible, a cigar in hand, sharp wit intact. He joked about death constantly, as if humor alone could keep it at bay. He outlived friends, rivals, and generations of performers. But even longevity comes at a cost. In his later years, diabetes required close monitoring, strict routines, and constant medical oversight. His ability to remain active for so long was remarkable, but biology always has the final say. When George Burns died, the world celebrated a life lived fully and unapologetically. Few paused to consider the quiet medical discipline that helped him reach such an extraordinary age. His story reminds us that survival does not mean invincibility, only delay.
On July 22, 2008, Estelle Getty died in Los Angeles at the age of 84. The official cause was complications related to Lewy body dementia. By the time she passed away, she had been living in near total seclusion, her once sharp mind slowly overtaken by illness. But dementia was not the only battle her body was fighting. Estelle Getty also lived with type 2 diabetes, a condition that quietly worsened her overall health as she aged. Diabetes increased her vulnerability to infections, weakened her cardiovascular system, and compounded the neurological decline she was already facing. The combination left her body fragile, with little capacity to recover from stress or illness. To millions of viewers, Getty was unforgettable as Sophia Petrillo on The Golden Girls, sharp-tongued, fearless, endlessly witty. Ironically, she played the oldest character on the show, despite being younger than most of her co-stars. On screen, her timing was perfect. Off-screen, her health was unraveling. As dementia progressed, public appearances stopped. Interviews disappeared. Fans were left wondering what had happened to her. Diabetes quietly continued its damage in the background, accelerating physical decline even as her cognitive world collapsed. When Estelle Getty died, tributes celebrated laughter and legacy. Few acknowledged how chronic illness had quietly shaped her final years.
On December 25, 2008, Christmas Day, Eartha Kitt died in a hospital in Connecticut. She was 81 years old. The official cause was complications from colon cancer. For many fans, the timing felt especially cruel. Cancer was not the only burden her body carried. Eartha Kitt had lived with type 2 diabetes for years. While it was not the primary cause of her death, diabetes quietly weakened her body's ability to withstand prolonged illness. It affected her circulation, slowed healing, and placed constant strain on her cardiovascular system. When cancer treatment entered the picture, her physical reserves were already limited. To the world, Eartha Kitt was fearless, a singer, actress, activist, and icon who refused to be controlled. From Broadway to Hollywood, from Catwoman to political exile, she lived boldly and unapologetically. On stage, she seemed untouchable, pure confidence wrapped in elegance. Offstage, her health told a different story. Diabetes complicated recovery and intensified fatigue. As cancer progressed, her body struggled to fight back. The end came not suddenly, but after a long, exhausting decline. When Eartha Kitt died, tributes praised her strength and originality. Few spoke about the quiet medical realities that shaped her final years.
Character 19, Dustin Diamond, 1977-2021. On February 1, 2021, Dustin Diamond died in a Florida hospital at just 44 years old. The official cause was stage 4 small cell carcinoma, a fast, aggressive form of cancer. His decline was shockingly rapid. From diagnosis to death, only weeks passed. But his body was not starting from a place of strength. For years, Dustin Diamond had lived with type 2 diabetes. The condition placed constant strain on his immune system and internal organs, quietly weakening his ability to fight serious illness. When cancer struck, his body had little reserve left to draw from.
To audiences, Diamond would always be Screech from Saved by the Bell, the awkward, energetic teenager frozen in time by reruns and nostalgia. But adulthood was far less kind to him. Fame faded, financial and legal troubles followed, stress mounted, and diabetes became part of his daily reality. When he was hospitalized in early 2021, his condition deteriorated with terrifying speed. Chemotherapy was attempted, but his body struggled to tolerate treatment. Diabetes, while not the headline cause, contributed to the collapse of his physical defenses. When Dustin Diamond passed away, the public focused on the tragedy of his age and the cruelty of cancer. Few mentioned the chronic illness that had quietly shaped his health long before the final diagnosis.
Character 20, Nat King Cole, 1919-1965. On February 15, 1965, Nat King Cole died in Santa Monica, California. He was only 45 years old. The official cause was lung cancer. At the time, the explanation seemed clear and final. A legendary voice silenced far too soon. But the full picture was more complicated. Nat King Cole lived in an era when health issues were rarely discussed publicly, especially among celebrities. Behind the scenes, he struggled with metabolic and cardiovascular problems that would today be closely linked to diabetes-related conditions. While diabetes was not listed as the direct cause of his death, medical historians and biographers have noted that chronic metabolic stress weakened his body long before cancer took hold. Cole was a relentless performer, non-stop touring, constant recording, endless pressure as one of the first Black artists to cross racial barriers in mainstream American entertainment. The stress was enormous, and rest was rare. His health quietly deteriorated under the weight of that pace. By the time lung cancer was diagnosed, his body had little resistance left. Treatments were limited in the 1960s, and his weakened condition made recovery impossible. What followed was a rapid decline that shocked fans around the world. When Nat King Cole died, America mourned a once-in-a-generation talent. Few questioned how years of physical strain, stress, and untreated chronic conditions may have shortened his life. His story reminds us that in earlier eras, many battles were fought silently, without diagnosis, without support, and without a voice.
These 20 stars may have lived very different lives, but they shared one haunting reality. Behind the fame, the applause, and the headlines, diabetes quietly shaped their final chapters. It didn't always appear on death certificates. It didn't always make the news, but it was there, damaging hearts, weakening bodies, and turning manageable illnesses into fatal outcomes. They were icons, legends, gone, but never forgotten. Do you remember any other celebrities whose health struggles were hidden from the public, or whose deaths deserve a deeper look? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you want more stories uncovering the dark, unseen side of fame, make sure to subscribe to Gone But Iconic. Because behind every legend, there is always a story the spotlight never showed.